Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be diving into the Renaissance, a period of, well, just incredible change and upheaval and rebirth in Europe. You can kind of think of it like Europe waking up from a really long nap when the Middle Ages and rediscovering all this amazing stuff from ancient Greece and Rome.
Yeah, exactly. And that rediscovery is what really fueled the rise of this new way of thinking called humanism.
Ah, humanism, that's the heart of it all, isn't it? But what exactly was it? Like, how would you define humanism?
Well, it wasn't really like a set of rules or anything like that. It was more of a shift in perspective.
Mhm.
Instead of just focusing on divine authority, humanists, they really started to emphasize human agency and creativity and our dignity as human beings.
So it was less about looking to, I don't know, the heavens for answers and more about looking inward at human potential, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what really helped kickstart that shift? It was the rediscovery of all these ancient Greek and Roman texts that had been, well, kind of lost for a while. We're
Mhm.
talking Plato, Aristotle, Cicero. Their emphasis on reason and observation and just asking questions really challenged the medieval worldview.
So these texts were like long lost treasure maps leading to a whole new way of seeing the world and ourselves.
Huh, I like that. A treasure map to a new way of thinking. And, some of the key figures who followed those maps, well, there was Petrarch, this Italian scholar. He was like obsessed with the ancient Romans. He actually wrote letters to people like Cicero, even though they'd been dead for centuries. Yeah. Like he was having a conversation across time.
Wow, that's pretty intense. I've definitely heard of Petrarch, but why is he considered so important to this whole humanism thing?
Well, he's often called the father of humanism because he believed that studying these classical texts wasn't just about like memorizing facts. It was about unlocking the potential of the human mind. And his passion for the classics really, it ignited this flame that spread throughout Europe.
So it's like he sparked this Renaissance chain reaction. Who else helped to spread that flame, that passion for humanism?
Oh, there were so many. But one of the most pivotal figures was Pico della Mirandola,
Yeah.
Italian philosopher. His Oration on the Dignity of Man, talk about a title, right? It was basically a manifesto for humanism. He argued that humans, we have unlimited potential. We can choose to rise to the level of angels or, well, sink to the level of beasts. It all depends on the choices we make.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful concept. So choice, individual choice and responsibility, those
Yeah.
were huge in humanism.
Absolutely. And then there's Erasmus, a Dutch scholar. He was known for super sharp wit and his insightful critiques of, well, pretty much everything and everyone, especially the church. He wrote this book called In Praise of Folly, and it basically satirizes all the hypocrisy and corruption he saw in the church and society. He was all about education and moral reform, but always with a good dose of humor.
It sounds like each of these guys played a pretty unique role in shaping the whole humanist movement. But were there I don't know, were there like core ideas, philosophical pillars that united them all?
Yeah, our source actually highlights three major pillars: the dignity of humanity, education as liberation, and art as a celebration of the human form.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. First, what did humanists mean by the dignity of humanity? I mean, wasn't that already a central idea in Christianity?
Well, it definitely was. Christianity emphasizes human dignity for sure. But you see, the medieval church, they often focused on the idea of original sin. Humans are inherently flawed, in need of redemption.
Mhm.
Humanists, though, they took a different approach. They celebrated our capacity for reason, our creativity, our virtue. They really believed that humans were capable of great things.
Got it. So it was less about our limitations and more about highlighting our potential.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And remember, Pico della Mirandola and his whole thing about angels and beasts, that perfectly captures the humanist belief in individual choice.
Yeah.
All comes down to the choices we make. And that's part of what gives us dignity, that ability to choose.
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring. So how did this focus on human potential connect to that second pillar, education as liberation?
Well, to humanists, education wasn't about just rote memorization or being told what to believe. It was about learning to think for yourself, developing moral virtue, and gaining the skills to participate in society. They believed that knowledge, especially in the humanities, could truly empower people and lead to a better world.
So education wasn't just about facts and figures. It was about like shaping good citizens, creating a more just and enlightened society. What exactly did they mean by the humanities though?
They called it studia humanitatis, which means studies of humanity. Basically all those subjects that help us understand what it means to be human, Grammar, rhetoric, history, poetry, moral philosophy, they were all super important. Oh, and, Baldassare Castiglione's The Book of the Courtier.
Yeah.
That's a classic example of how they thought about education, like a guide to becoming this well-rounded, ethical individual.
So a true Renaissance education, it was about more than just, book smarts. It was about character development, becoming someone who could really contribute to the world.
Exactly. And you know what? This whole idea of the well-rounded individual, it ties directly into that third pillar, art as a celebration of the human form. Renaissance art is full of, well, depictions of the human body in all its glory, all its beauty and complexity.
Oh, yeah, there's incredible paintings and sculptures. Why was the human form so captivating to Renaissance artists, though? Like, what was it about the body that drew them in?
We have to remember that for humanists, the human body was a symbol of, well, our potential, our connection to the natural world, our capacity for both beauty and greatness. I mean, think about Michelangelo's David,
Sure.
a masterpiece that just embodies strength and grace and human potential. Or Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, which explores the perfect proportions of the body and how it relates to the universe.
Wow, yeah, those are some iconic images. It's like Renaissance artists, they really saw this deep connection between art, science, and, well, the human experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this fascination with the human form, it wasn't limited to painting and sculpture. Renaissance architecture also drew inspiration from those classical forms, emphasizing symmetry and harmony, the grandeur of what humans could achieve.
So from art to architecture to education, humanism really touched every part of Renaissance life. But how did all these new ideas about human potential, about individuals having more agency, how did that impact, I don't know, the power structures of the time, the church, the political landscape?
Ooh, that's where things get really interesting. I mean, humanism, with its focus on reason and individual judgment, well, it was bound to clash with the established authorities. And we'll dive into all of that in the next part of our deep dive.
So before we took a little break there, we were getting into some pretty interesting stuff, about how humanism started to, I don't know, kind of challenge some of the big power structures of the Renaissance, like the church and governments.
Yeah, that's right. And honestly, one of the biggest clashes was with the Catholic Church. I mean, you have to remember, they held so much power back then.
Right. For centuries, it was like the dominant force in Europe, the church. So how did humanism start to challenge that?
Well, think about it. The church's authority, it was largely based on their interpretation of the Bible, of religious doctrine, right? And humanists, they came along and they put this emphasis on reason, on individual interpretation of Scripture, and that really started to chip away at the church's, well, their monopoly on truth, I guess you could say.
So people were encouraged to actually engage with religious texts themselves, form their own conclusions.
Exactly. And this whole shift toward individual interpretation, it got a huge boost from the printing press. I mean, suddenly, Bibles and other religious texts, they were more widely available. People could read and interpret them for themselves, and that was pretty revolutionary.
Wow, yeah, it's crazy to think how a technological invention like that could shake things up so much.
Yeah, the printing press, I mean, that was a total game changer. And you really see this shift towards individual interpretation in the writings of people like Martin Luther, who challenged the church's authority and emphasized this, well, this direct relationship with God. And those ideas, they really aligned with a lot of humanist principles.
So humanism, I mean, it didn't directly cause the Protestant Reformation, but it definitely paved the way for it.
I'd say so, yeah. It was like
Yeah.
humanism created this fertile intellectual soil, where these reform movements could take root.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about the impact on politics? We touched on Machiavelli a bit earlier, but how did humanism change the way people thought about leadership and how governments should work?
Well, before the Renaissance, the traditional view of leadership was this whole idea of divine right, kings and queens ruling because God said so. But humanists, they look back to ancient Greece and Rome.
Yeah.
Those republics where civic virtue and the common good, those were the big ideas.
So it wasn't just about inheriting power. It was about earning it, about demonstrating wisdom and justice, a commitment to serving the people, right?
Yeah, that was the idea. Humanists, they believe that rulers, they should be educated, ethical, truly serving the common good.
Hmm.
Of course, things don't always work out so ideally in practice, but these ideas, they did plant the seeds for, well, for new ways of thinking about government, about the relationship between the people and their leaders.
Now, Machiavelli's The Prince, that seems to be a totally different take, right? Like a much more cynical view of leadership.
Right. Machiavelli, he was a lot more pragmatic, even, well, some might say ruthless,
Yeah.
He basically said, hey, rulers need to be smart, they got to be strategic to stay in power, and sometimes, well, sometimes that means bending the rules, even if it means, doing things that aren't exactly morally sound.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty far from the whole virtuous ruler idea. So is Machiavelli even considered a humanist?
Oh, that's a big debate. Scholars are still arguing about that one. Some say that Machiavelli's focus on human nature and the realpolitik of it all, that aligns with humanism. But others see him as a cynic who just believed that the ends justify the means, whatever those means might be.
So even within humanism, there was room for debate about, how to apply these ideas to the real world, especially when it comes to something as messy as politics.
Absolutely. Humanism, it wasn't this like monolithic thing. It was a bunch of different viewpoints and different approaches.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's shift gears a little and talk about humanism's impact on art and architecture. We've already touched on some of the big iconic works, but what were some of the defining features of Renaissance art that made it stand out from, the art of the Middle Ages?
Oh, well, one of the most obvious differences was just the emphasis on realism, on celebrating the human form. Renaissance artists, they really tried to capture the world as they saw it, using techniques like perspective and, really studying anatomy to create these lifelike and, well, these compelling images.
So it was a move away from like that more stylized, more symbolic art that was common in the Middle Ages towards something more naturalistic, more focused on, human experiences.
Exactly. And you see this reflected in the subjects they chose. The human body became this source of fascination. They were depicting it in all its beauty and, well, its complexity and just full of emotion. It was like they were rediscovering the wonder of what it means to be human.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It was all about celebrating human potential, the beauty of the natural world. Leonardo da Vinci, his anatomical drawings and paintings, they're so beautiful, but they're also so scientifically accurate. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, absolutely. And Michelangelo, I mean, his Sistine Chapel ceiling, come on, that's like one of the greatest masterpieces of Renaissance art.
For sure. Michelangelo's work, it really captures that grandeur and, well, the ambition of Renaissance art. It's
Yeah.
incredible how he portrays these biblical stories with so much power and realism, And then there's Raphael. He was known for these graceful compositions, this beautiful blend of classical and Christian themes.
Totally.
Now, what about Renaissance architecture? Those incredible cathedrals and palaces, with those soaring domes and the elegance of it all. How did humanism influence that?
Well, they took a lot of inspiration from the buildings of ancient Rome,
Mm.
emphasizing symmetry, balance, harmony. And they were using mathematical principles to create structures that were, well, not just beautiful, but, structurally sound. Like,
Yeah.
think about Brunelleschi's dome on the Florence Cathedral. That was a feat of engineering, It really pushed the boundaries of what people thought was possible back then.
Wow, it's pretty incredible to see how these humanist ideas sparked such a creative explosion, in art and architecture.
It was a pretty remarkable period, you're right.
Mm.
And that spirit of innovation, of discovery, it wasn't limited to art and architecture. It spilled over into science and exploration, too.
Oh, right. Speaking of pushing boundaries, what role did humanism play in the scientific revolution that was happening at the same time?
Well, humanism's emphasis on observation, on using reason, and, not being afraid to question authority, all of that was a huge driver of scientific progress. Thinkers like Copernicus and Galileo, they were challenging these long-held beliefs about the universe,
Hmm.
using the scientific method to come up with, totally groundbreaking discoveries.
Yeah, Copernicus and his theory that the Earth revolves around the sun, that was pretty radical back then, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, totally revolutionary. I mean, it
Right.
directly challenged the church's teachings.
Hmm.
They were adamant that the Earth was the center of the universe.
Right.
But Copernicus, his work was based on, careful observations, mathematical calculations, and it really helped usher in this new era of science, one that valued observation and reason over dogma and tradition.
So humanism, it was like the intellectual foundation for the whole scientific revolution.
That's a great way to think about it. And that spirit of inquiry, it extended to other fields too,
Yeah.
medicine, anatomy, botany. There were advances everywhere you looked. And Leonardo da Vinci, oh, he's a perfect example. His curiosity, his incredibly detailed observations of the natural world, he really embodied that Renaissance spirit of scientific exploration.
Yeah, his notebooks, they're legendary. It's all these sketches and diagrams that blur the lines between like art and science. He was trying to, I don't know, unlock the secrets of the universe.
Exactly. And that same thirst for knowledge, well, it led to this huge wave of exploration during the Renaissance, right?
Mm.
European explorers, they set sail all over the globe, driven by this desire to map new territories, discover new cultures, expand trade routes. It was an incredible time of discovery.
Yeah, all those voyages, they led to incredible discoveries for sure. But there was a dark side too, right? I mean, a lot of exploitation, colonization followed in the wake of all these explorations.
That's right. We have to acknowledge that while the Renaissance was this period of, huge progress, it also had its shadows. The same curiosity that drove scientific exploration, well, it also fueled a desire for conquest, for control.
It seems like every period in history has its complexities and its contradictions.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so important to understand those nuances, if we really want to grasp the legacy of the Renaissance. We've covered a lot of ground so far, from the basic ideas of humanism to its impact on everything from art and religion to politics, science, exploration. But what does it all mean for us, living in the 21st century? How can we connect these Renaissance ideas to our modern world? Well, stay tuned because we're going to explore that in the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Renaissance humanism. Over the last two parts, we've really explored a lot of ground, from the core ideas of humanism to its impact on art, religion, politics, science, you name it.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, but now the big question is, well, what does it all mean for us today? How do these ideas, these concepts from centuries ago connect to the 21st century?
Right, that's what I've been thinking about too. I mean, it's all fascinating stuff, but I'm curious, how do these humanist ideas actually apply to, I don't know, to the challenges and opportunities we face in the modern world?
Well, one of the key takeaways from humanism, one that really resonates today, I think, is that emphasis on human potential. They really believed in the power of the individual to shape their own destiny, to learn, to create, to make a difference.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that we all have agency, that we're
Yeah.
not just passive bystanders in the world.
Exactly. And that means, well, it means we have to invest in education that fosters critical thinking, creativity, empowers people to really reach their full potential.
Mm.
And I mean, everyone, regardless of their background.
So it's not just about individual achievement, it's about creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to, I don't know, to thrive.
Absolutely. That's a crucial point. And it connects to another big idea from the Renaissance, and that's civic engagement. The humanists, they believed that individuals had a responsibility to participate in public life, to use their knowledge, their talents, to make their communities and the world a better place.
So it's not enough to be a brilliant artist or scientist or scholar. You have to be an engaged citizen too.
That's the idea. Whether it's through voting, volunteering, advocating for social justice, or even just being informed, staying engaged with what's happening, all of that, it's essential for a healthy society.
And it seems like that idea of civic engagement, it's more important than ever these days, right? I mean, with all the challenges we're facing, climate change, social inequality, political polarization, you name it.
You're right, it's huge. We need informed, engaged citizens who are willing to step up and, well, tackle these tough issues head on. And you know what? We can find inspiration in the Renaissance humanists. I mean, these were people who dared to question authority, to challenge the status quo, to imagine a better future.
It's not just about admiring what they did, it's about learning from them, taking that spirit of innovation and applying it to the problems we face today.
Exactly. Another thing the Renaissance reminds us of is, well, the importance of embracing different perspectives. The humanists, they were so curious about the world, eager to learn from other cultures, other traditions.
Yeah. So it wasn't about shutting out different viewpoints or clinging to dogma. It was about actively seeking out new ideas, new perspectives.
That's right. I mean, they understood that knowledge isn't limited to one place or one perspective. And that's a lesson we really need to take to heart today, especially with the world becoming more interconnected, more diverse. We've got to be open to different ideas, willing to listen and learn from people who see things differently than we do.
It's about recognizing that the world is complex and that, well, that different viewpoints are a source of strength, a source of learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
But, we also have to acknowledge the other side of the Renaissance, the not-so-pretty side. I'm talking about the elitism, the colonialism, the exploitation that went hand in hand with a lot of those amazing achievements.
Yeah, it's a reminder that progress isn't always linear, that even in times of great enlightenment, there can be blind spots.
That's why it's so crucial to be mindful of history, to be aware of the mistakes that have been made, and to really commit to creating a better, more just future.
So how do we reconcile those two sides of the Renaissance, the brilliance and the shadows? How do we move forward while still learning from the past?
That's the big question we all face, isn't it? I think it's about embracing the best of the Renaissance, the curiosity, the creativity, the thirst for knowledge, but also being critical of its shortcomings and really striving to do better. It means challenging our own assumptions, confronting our own biases, and working to build a world where, well, where everyone has the chance to truly flourish.
So the legacy of the Renaissance, it's more than just beautiful art and fascinating ideas, right? It's like a call to action, a challenge to live up to those ideals of human potential.
That's a great way to put it. The Renaissance reminds us that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
This has been an incredible journey, exploring the world of Renaissance humanism, and it's just amazing to see how those ideas, from centuries ago are still so relevant to us today.
It really is. And, as we face all the challenges and the opportunities of the 21st century, let's remember the spirit of the Renaissance, that spirit of curiosity, creativity, and that belief in the boundless potential of humanity.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep working to make the world a more just, equitable, and, well, a more enlightened place.